The massive hall of the Galactic Academy buzzed with low murmurs as hundreds of students from across the galaxy stood in formation. Towering holographic screens flickered above them, displaying the crest of the Galactic Defense Force. The room was so large that Jake Carter could barely see the far end through the soft blue haze of light. Alien instructors with metallic limbs and glowing eyes floated silently above the floor, their expressions cold and calculating. Jake's heart hammered in his chest as he stood next to his best friend, Lena. Jake glanced at Lena, who gave him a small, nervous smile. "It's just a test, right?" she whispered. Jake swallowed hard. "Yeah, just a test." A sharp mechanical hum filled the air as the central AI proctor descended from the ceiling, its sleek metal body spinning midair before coming to a halt above the students. Its glowing red eyes pulsed as it scanned the crowd. A cold, synthetic voice filled the room. "Attention, candidates. Welcome to the final assessment of the Galactic Defense Academy. Failure will result in immediate expulsion. Your species' future status within the Galactic Council will depend on your performance." Jake felt the blood drain from his face. Expulsion wasn't just a setback. It was a death sentence for humanity's position in the galaxy. Humans were already seen as weak, primitive, a species from a death world, sure, but only because Earth's harsh environment forced them to adapt and survive. The other species saw humans as unpredictable, dangerous, and inferior. Jake noticed the sneer on the face of a tall reptilian student to his left. The alien's deep yellow eyes narrowed, and its forked tongue flicked out. "Humans," it hissed. "Why are they even here?" Jake tensed, his fists clenching at his sides. He wanted to say something, but he knew it wouldn't matter. Humans weren't respected in the academy. He'd spent the last year being ridiculed and underestimated. But this test was his last chance to prove them wrong. "Begin," the AI said. The floor beneath them vibrated as the room's walls shifted and slid apart. Steel platforms emerged from the ground, and holographic panels flickered to life, forming a complex, ever-changing maze. Laser turrets extended from the ceiling, and the floor beneath them hummed with a dangerous energy field. Cloaking traps shimmered in the air, barely visible. "This is not a simulation," the AI's voice said. "Injury and death are possible outcomes." Jake took a sharp breath as the first wave of attack drones descended from the ceiling. Lena grabbed his arm. "Jake, what do we?" "Move." Jake pulled her aside just as a plasma bolt shot toward them. It exploded against the ground, leaving a smoking crater. The crowd scattered. The students who were fast enough activated their cloaking devices and vanished into thin air. Jake ducked beneath another blast, dragging Lena with him. He saw one of the reptilian students activate his cloak and disappear. Another alien with crystalline skin shot forward with inhuman speed, leaving a trail of light behind. "Come on." Jake pulled Lena toward the nearest cover, a steel pillar. A drone whirred overhead, its targeting laser sweeping the room. Jake's eyes widened as he saw it lock onto Lena. "Lena, get down." Before he could think, Jake launched himself toward her. Time slowed. He felt his muscles tighten, his vision sharpening to a terrifying degree. He slammed into Lena, knocking her aside just as the drone fired. The plasma bolt flew inches past his face, close enough that he could feel the heat on his skin. He hit the ground hard, rolling with Lena beneath him. "Jake, how did you?" Lena stared at him. Jake didn't know. He'd moved faster than he ever had before. His instincts had taken over. Something deep and primal had awakened inside him. The AI's voice crackled overhead. "Error. Human reaction speed exceeds acceptable limits." Jake's eyes widened. What the hell did that mean? A second drone descended. Jake pushed Lena behind him. He could feel his heart pounding, but it wasn't from fear. It was from adrenaline. His muscles felt supercharged, his senses razor-sharp. The drone fired. Jake moved without thinking. He ducked, pivoted, and then leaped toward the drone. His hand shot out, grabbing the machine midair. Metal crunched beneath his grip. Jake twisted and ripped the drone's core free in a single brutal motion. Sparks showered down as the drone fell limp in his hands. The room fell into stunned silence. Jake stood there, breathing hard, the wreckage of the drone clutched in his hands. He slowly turned to face the others. The reptilian student who had sneered at him earlier was staring, mouth slightly open. The crystalline alien took a hesitant step back. The AI's red eyes flared brighter. Human reaction and strength level. Jake dropped the broken drone at his feet. The metal clanged loudly against the floor. The sound echoed through the hall. "What did you do?" Lena whispered. Jake shook his head, still trying to understand what had just happened. His hands were trembling. His whole body felt different, stronger, faster. His instincts had been too sharp, his strength unnatural. A loud warning klaxon filled the room. "Threat level recalibration in progress," the AI said. The walls began shifting again. The platforms in the maze started to rotate, and the attack drones multiplied. Jake's heart skipped a beat. He grabbed Lena's arm. "They're adjusting the test," he said. "For you," Lena whispered. The AI's voice boomed louder, colder. Threat level increased. Additional combat drones deploying. Jake saw movement in the air above them. A dozen new drones emerged from the ceiling. They were larger, heavier, and more heavily armed than the others. The AI's red eyes pulsed dangerously. "What the hell is happening?" Jake growled. Lena's eyes widened as the drones activated their targeting systems. "They think you're dangerous," she said. Jake watched the drones rise. He felt a deep, cold certainty settle in his chest. "Maybe I am." The first drone fired. Jake ducked and sprang forward with impossible speed. He leaped onto the nearest platform and tore through the air toward the drone. His hand shot out, grabbed the machine, and crushed it like paper. He spun, ripped a second drone apart midair, and landed in a crouch. The AI's voice buzzed harshly. "Error. Threat level rising. Human genetic anomaly detected." Jake stood up slowly. His breath was steady. His hands were no longer shaking. He turned toward Lena, whose mouth was hanging open. "What are you?" she whispered. Jake's jaw tightened. "A Deathworlder," he said. The AI's red eyes glowed brighter. Testing parameters adjusted. Further analysis required. Jake's gaze sharpened. The drones were reforming. More were emerging from the walls. The test wasn't over. It had just begun. The room was still vibrating from the impact of the destroyed drones. Sparks flickered from the wreckage at Jake's feet, and the smell of burnt metal filled the air. The other students stood frozen, their eyes wide with disbelief. Even the reptilian student who had mocked Jake earlier was backing away slowly, his yellow eyes narrowing in confusion and fear. Jake's breathing was steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. His muscles felt coiled and ready, like they were primed for more action. He didn't understand it. His strength, his reaction time, it was all beyond anything he had ever experienced. His body had moved on instinct, faster and sharper than it should have been possible for a human. The AI's red eyes pulsed again, and its cold voice echoed through the room. "Human genetic anomaly confirmed. Further analysis required." Jake's jaw tightened. His eyes darted toward Lena, who was still crouched behind the steel pillar. Her face was pale, her blue eyes wide. Jake took a step toward her, but Lena flinched back slightly. That reaction hurt more than the plasma burns on his skin. "Lena," Jake said softly. She shook her head, her eyes flicking toward the wreckage at his feet. "Jake, how did you?" "I don't know," Jake said honestly. He glanced at his hands. His fingers were still shaking from the sheer force he had used to crush the drones. "I just reacted." The AI's voice returned, colder and more calculating. Human subject Jake Carter exhibits enhanced reaction time, strength, and sensory perception beyond standard parameters. Deathworld classification confirmed. Testing parameters adjusted. Jake's stomach twisted. Deathworld classification. He'd heard the term before. Humans were technically considered Deathworlders because Earth was a hostile environment. But that classification was political, not biological. There was nothing in human genetics that should make them stronger than other species. The other students were still staring at him. A crystalline alien with shimmering silver skin stepped forward cautiously. Its glowing white eyes narrowed. "That should not have been possible," it said in a sharp, crystalline voice. Jake's fists tightened at his sides. He didn't know what to say, and the tension in the room was building by the second. The reptilian alien hissed, "This human, he's dangerous." Jake's gaze snapped toward him. The reptilian scales bristled, and his forked tongue flicked out. "You saw what he did," the reptilian growled. "He crushed combat drones with his bare hands. He's not normal." "Enough." The AI's voice cut through the tension. Jake turned toward the AI as it floated higher into the air. Its glowing red eyes scanned him again, beams of light washing over his body. "Jake Carter, you are hereby classified as a genetic outlier. Additional testing is now required to determine the extent of your capabilities." Jake's heart hammered against his chest. "No," Lena said suddenly, stepping forward. "That's not fair." He passed the test. "Incorrect," the AI replied coldly. "The test is not over." Without warning, the floor beneath them shifted. The steel platforms realigned with a loud metallic screech. The maze reconfigured itself, and new attack drones descended from the ceiling. These were different, larger, heavier, with reinforced armor and enhanced weapon systems. The glowing red targeting systems locked onto Jake immediately. Jake's muscles tensed. "You've got to be kidding me," he muttered. "Threat level increased," the AI said. "Begin secondary assessment." The first drone fired. A beam of blue plasma shot toward Jake. He moved before he could think, his body reacting faster than his mind. He rolled to the side, sprang to his feet, and leaped toward the drone. His hand shot out, gripping the machine's metal arm. With a sharp twist, he tore the arm free and drove the broken weapon into the drone's core. Sparks exploded outward as the machine crumpled to the ground. The other drones swarmed toward him. "Jake!" Lena screamed. Jake pivoted, grabbed a falling piece of debris, and hurled it toward the nearest drone. The metal fragment slammed into the machine's targeting system, knocking it off balance. Jake dashed forward, vaulted over a steel platform, and slammed his fist into the drone's chest. The impact shattered the machine's core. "What the hell is happening?" Jake growled. His body was moving on autopilot, faster and stronger than he had ever imagined. He could feel every pulse of energy in the room, every shift in the air. His muscles responded like a finely tuned weapon. "You're adapting," Lena shouted from across the room. "Jake, you're not supposed to be able to do this." Jake ducked beneath another plasma bolt and ripped a drone's leg off with his bare hands. He spun and drove the metal through the chest of the next attacker. Pieces of metal and wiring scattered across the floor. The AI's red eyes flared. Human adaptability exceeds projections, threat level rising. Jake's head snapped toward the AI. His chest heaved as he stood among the wreckage of the drones. The other students were no longer just shocked. They were terrified. The reptilian alien had taken several steps back, his slitted eyes wide with disbelief. The crystalline alien watched Jake with cold calculation. "This is impossible," the crystalline alien said. "Humans shouldn't have this level of strength." Jake wiped the sweat from his brow. His hands were still trembling. His heart was still racing. He had never felt more alive, and it scared the hell out of him. "Congratulations, Jake Carter," the AI said, its tone eerily calm. "You are no longer considered an underdog." Jake's eyes narrowed. "That's why you increased the threat level," Jake said. "Because I'm human." "Correct," the AI replied. "Humans are not considered dangerous by galactic standards. However, your performance suggests otherwise." Recalibrating threat index. Jake felt a wave of cold wash over him. He wasn't sure what that meant, but he had a feeling it wasn't good. "What's going on?" Lena asked, her voice shaking. Jake shook his head. "I don't know." The crystalline alien's gaze sharpened. "He's dangerous." "No," Lena snapped. "He just passed the test." "The test is not over," the AI said. "Further assessment required." Jake turned toward Lena. "Get out of here." "What?" "No." Lena's eyes widened. "Go," Jake insisted. His muscles were already coiling, preparing for the next attack. "I don't know what's happening to me, Lena. But if they keep pushing, someone's going to get hurt." The AI's red eyes glowed brighter. New threat level confirmed. Human classification adjusted. Potential predator. Jake's eyes narrowed. His fists tightened at his sides. "If they want a predator," he said quietly, "they're going to get one." The next wave of drones dropped from the ceiling. Jake's jaw tightened. His body moved before his mind could catch up. He sprinted toward the first machine, leaped onto its back, and ripped its head free with a brutal twist. He landed in a crouch, his breath sharp. The AI's voice filled the room. Human adaptation confirmed. Secondary threat level unlocked. Jake's breathing slowed. His gaze sharpened. Jake stood in the middle of the training chamber, surrounded by the smoking remains of the destroyed drones. His chest heaved with deep, measured breaths. His hands were trembling, but it wasn't from fear. It was from the raw surge of strength coursing through his body. His muscles were burning, but his mind felt sharp. Every nerve in his body was alive, aware of the smallest shift in the air. His senses were heightened beyond anything he had ever imagined. The AI's glowing red eyes hovered above him, scanning him with cold precision. Human threat level upgraded, the AI announced, adjusting galactic classification parameters. Jake's jaw tightened. He could feel the eyes of the other students on him. Fear, suspicion, confusion. The crystalline alien who had spoken earlier was watching him carefully, its white eyes narrowed. The reptilian student had taken several steps back, his scaled tail curling defensively behind him. Jake wiped the sweat from his brow, his hand coming away stained with the dark soot from the destroyed drones. He turned toward Lena, who was standing at the edge of the platform. Her eyes were wide, her expression torn between awe and concern. "Jake," she whispered. "I'm fine," Jake said, though he wasn't sure if that was true. His body felt different, stronger, faster. He had always been fit, but this was something else entirely. His reflexes were beyond human. His strength was unnatural. The AI's red eyes flared. Human adaptation exceeds known biological limits. Adjusting threat classification. "What the hell does that mean?" Jake demanded. The AI's voice was cold and mechanical. "Human species reclassification underway. Galactic notification in progress." Jake's breath hitched. Galactic notification. His eyes narrowed. That sounded like trouble. Lena took a step toward him. "Jake, what's happening?" "I don't know," Jake said. His fists tightened at his sides. "But it's not good." The crystalline alien stepped forward, its silver skin shimmering under the dim lights. "Humans are not supposed to be capable of this," it said, its tone sharp and accusing. "Your species is classified as a Deathworld race, but you lack the technological or biological advancements to justify this level of strength." Jake's gaze darkened. Guess the classification was wrong. The crystalline alien's glowing white eyes narrowed, or incomplete. Suddenly, the room's lights flickered. A loud metallic hum vibrated through the floor. The AI's red eyes flared dangerously bright. "Warning," the AI's voice shifted in tone. "Unauthorized signal detected. Galactic transmission intercepted." Jake's gaze shot toward Lena. "What's it talking about?" Lena's eyes widened. "It's broadcasting." "Broadcasting what?" "You," Lena whispered. "It's telling the galaxy what you just did." Jake's stomach twisted. "Shut it down." Lena ran toward a control panel, her hands flying across the interface. Error messages flared across the screen. "I can't," she shouted. "It's locked out." "Galactic response detected," the AI said. Its red eyes pulsed. "Incoming signal from the Galactic Council." Jake's heart hammered in his chest. The Galactic Council. That was bad. Very bad. A holographic image flared to life in the middle of the room. The flickering blue form of a tall alien appeared, a member of the High Command of the Galactic Council. Its elongated face was partially hidden beneath a dark metallic hood, and its glowing yellow eyes burned with cold authority. "Identify the source of the disturbance," the alien commanded. The AI's red eyes pulsed. "Human subject Jake Carter. Performance exceeds biological norms. Deathworld adaptation confirmed." The council member's eyes narrowed dangerously. Its gaze shifted toward Jake. "Explain yourself," the alien said. Its voice was low and dangerous. Jake's fists tightened. "I don't have to explain anything." "Incorrect," the AI said. "Galactic protocol requires species classification to be reviewed in cases of biological anomaly." The council member's expression darkened. "Human, how did you do this?" Jake's gaze sharpened. "I don't know." "Impossible," the alien said. "No Deathworld species has shown this level of combat adaptability." Jake's teeth clenched. He could feel the tension in the room tightening like a noose. The other students were still standing at a distance, watching him like he was a bomb about to go off. The crystalline alien stepped forward again. "He's dangerous," it said. "I saved everyone." Jake snapped. "And yet," the council member's eyes flared dangerously, "you present a threat to galactic stability." Jake's hands curled into fists. "So what? You're going to punish me for being strong." "Galactic stability is maintained through order," the council member replied coldly. "Uncontrolled variables are unacceptable." Jake's blood ran cold. He could feel where this was. "You've already been classified," the council member said. "A threat." Jake's chest tightened. His instincts screamed that this was going to get worse. "Galactic protocol requires that threats to stability be contained," the AI said. Jake's gaze shot toward Lena. "What the hell does that mean?" "It means," Lena said, her voice trembling, "they're going to kill you." Jake's heart slammed against his ribs. He took a step forward, placing himself between Lena and the holographic figure. "You really think that's going to happen?" "Galactic Command has already issued a containment order," the council member said. The floor beneath them vibrated again. Jake's eyes darted toward the steel walls as hidden panels began sliding open. Heavy security droids emerged, their plasma weapons humming to life. Red targeting lasers locked onto Jake's chest. The reptilian alien hissed. "He's too dangerous to let live." Jake's jaw tightened. His muscles were already coiling. His heart was pounding. "Jake!" Lena shouted. Jake's eyes narrowed as the first droid stepped forward. Its targeting laser flickered across his chest. "Stand down," the AI commanded. Jake's body moved before his mind could process it. He shot forward, his hand lashing out. His fingers wrapped around the droid's metal arm. With a violent twist, he ripped the weapon free and drove it into the droid's chest. The machine exploded in a shower of sparks. The other droids opened fire. Jake rolled beneath the plasma bolts, his body moving with unnatural speed. He grabbed another droid by the neck and slammed it into the ground. Metal shards scattered across the floor. "Jake!" Lena screamed. Jake turned toward the holographic figure. "If you think you can contain me," he growled, "you're welcome to try." The council member's yellow eyes gleamed beneath the hood. Human aggression confirmed. Threat level elevated. Jake's breath sharpened. His muscles burned. "They want a predator," Jake growled. His eyes flashed dangerously. "Let's see how they handle one." The droids charge. Jake sprinted toward them, his fists blazing. He leaped into the air, grabbed the nearest machine, and tore its head off with a single brutal twist. He landed hard, his breath ragged, and spun toward the next attacker. Lina's voice was sharp. "Jake, there's too many." Then they should have sent more. The AI's red eyes pulsed. Human adaptation. Escalating. Jake's eyes flashed. His fists tightened. His body moved with terrifying precision. If they thought he was dangerous before, he was about to show them what a real human could do. Jake stood in the smoking wreckage of the training chamber, his breath ragged and his fists still clenched. Pieces of shattered droids lay scattered across the metallic floor, sparking and twitching as their internal systems failed. His chest was heaving, and his hands were trembling, not from fear, but from the adrenaline still pumping through his veins. His muscles were burning, and his vision was sharper than it had ever been. He could feel every shift in the air, every vibration beneath his feet. His body was alive in a way that felt almost unnatural. Lina rushed toward him, her face pale and eyes wide with fear. "Jake, are you okay?" Jake wiped the back of his hand across his mouth and exhaled sharply. "I'm fine." "You don't look fine," Lina said, glancing at the destroyed droids. "You? How did you even do that?" Jake's eyes narrowed. "I don't know." The red glow of the AI's eyes flickered above them, casting a cold light over the ruined training ground. "Human threat level elevated," the AI announced, advising immediate containment. Jake's head snapped toward the floating red eye. His lips curled in a snarl. "Yeah, you and what army?" A low mechanical hum vibrated through the floor. The walls of the chamber began to shift, and new compartments slid open. Larger droids stepped forward, their heavy metallic frames gleaming under the dim lights. Their weapons hummed to life, the barrels glowing with a deadly blue light. Lina's eyes widened. "Jake, they're bringing out the war models." Jake's jaw tightened. His muscles coiled like springs beneath his skin. He took a step forward, his fists raised. "Stop!" A sharp voice cut through the tension. Jake's gaze shot toward the entrance of the chamber. The crystalline alien was standing there, flanked by two other council members. Its silver skin shimmered beneath the harsh lighting, and its glowing white eyes narrowed dangerously. "Cease this foolishness," the crystalline alien said. "He's proven his strength. Now we need answers." The AI's red eyes pulsed. "Human anomaly requires containment." "No," the crystalline alien said. "Containment will come later. First, we need to understand what we're dealing with." Jake's fists relaxed, but his gaze remained hard. His instincts were screaming at him. The crystalline alien stepped forward, its gaze locked onto Jake. "You are different," it said. "Humans are not supposed to be capable of this level of biological adaptation." Jake's lips curled into a thin smile. "Maybe you underestimated us." "Unlikely," the crystalline alien replied coldly. "The human species has been studied extensively. You've been classified as dangerous, but never on this scale." Jake took a step toward it. "Guess your classification system is broken." The alien's eyes flashed. "Or you're an anomaly." Jake's gaze sharpened. He could feel his heart beating faster, his muscles twitching beneath his skin. His whole body felt different, stronger, faster. It wasn't just adrenaline anymore. Something inside him had changed. Lina's hand brushed his arm. "Jake, this isn't normal," she whispered, "even for a human." Jake's eyes darkened. "I know." The crystalline alien's gaze shifted toward Lina. "And you? You've known about this." "No," Lina said. "Jake isn't enhanced. He's just human." The alien's eyes flared. "Then humanity itself may be more dangerous than we realized." Jake's fists tightened. "And what are you going to do about that?" The alien's gaze darkened. "We'll decide that shortly." Suddenly, the air in the chamber shifted. A low, resonating hum filled the space, and the AI's red eyes pulsed violently. "Alert!" The AI's voice sharpened. "Incoming transmission from Galactic High Command." A massive hologram flared to life in the center of the room. The towering form of a high commander appeared, tall, cloaked in dark robes, with burning yellow eyes beneath the hood. The alien's voice was cold and sharp. "Explain this disturbance," the high commander said. The crystalline alien stepped forward and bowed its head. "High Commander, the human, he has exhibited biological adaptations beyond our understanding. He destroyed the containment droids with minimal effort." The High Commander's burning gaze turned toward Jake. "Human, approach." Jake's gaze hardened. His muscles tensed. He took a slow step forward, his eyes locked on the figure. "You have been classified as a threat to galactic stability," the High Commander said. "You will submit to examination and containment." Jake's lips curled. "Not happening." The High Commander's eyes flared dangerously. "Resistance is not advised." "Then I guess we're doing this the hard way," Jake growled. "Containment protocol authorized," the AI said. The heavy war droids stepped forward, their plasma weapons locking onto Jake's chest. Jake's body moved before his mind could process it. He shot forward, driving his fist into the nearest droid's chest. Metal buckled beneath his knuckles as the machine crumpled to the floor. Plasma bolts seared through the air, but Jake was already moving. He twisted beneath the fire, his foot lashing out and smashing into another droid's head. Sparks erupted as the machine hit the ground. The High Commander's gaze sharpened. Impossible. Jake leaped toward the next droid, grabbing it by the arm and ripping the weapon free. He spun and fired the plasma bolt into the other droids. The air filled with smoke and the sharp scent of burning metal. "Human adaptation. Accelerating," the AI's voice crackled. Jake's breath sharpened. His muscles burned, but he could feel his strength growing with each passing second. His body was moving faster. His reflexes were sharper. He wasn't just fighting, he was evolving. The High Commander's gaze darkened. "This is unnatural." Jake's eyes flashed. He sprinted toward the last droid, driving his fist through its chest. The machine shuddered and collapsed. Jake stood over the smoking wreckage, his chest heaving. "You think you can contain me?" Jake's voice was low and dangerous. "Try harder." The High Commander's burning yellow eyes narrowed. "You have crossed a line, human. You will be dealt with." Jake's gaze darkened. "Come and try." The hologram flickered and vanished. The AI's red eyes dimmed. The room was silent except for the crackle of sparking metal. Lena ran toward Jake, her eyes wide with fear. "Jake, what's happening to you?" Jake's breath was sharp. His muscles were still coiled. His whole body felt like it was on fire, but it wasn't pain. It was power. "I don't know," Jake whispered, his gaze sharpened. Jake stood at the center of the ruined training chamber, his breathing ragged, his fists still clenched at his sides. The broken droids lay scattered around him, smoking and sparking, their twisted metal forms a testament to his strength. Lena stood beside him, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and fear. His body still pulsed with that strange energy, his senses sharper than ever, his muscles coiled and ready to strike. But the room was unnervingly quiet now. The High Commander's hologram had disappeared, but Jake could feel the tension lingering in the air. Something was coming. He could feel it in his bones. "Jake," Lena's voice was quiet, her hand brushing his arm. "What's happening to you?" Jake's jaw tightened. His gaze remained fixed on the flickering red light in the corner of the room, the AI's eye. It was dim now, barely glowing. But Jake wasn't fooled. He could feel the machine watching him, analyzing him. "I don't know," Jake said, his voice low. "But I think they've decided I'm too dangerous to leave alive." Lena swallowed hard. "Jake, the High Commander. He's not going to let this go." "I know." A low mechanical hum vibrated through the floor. Jake's eyes narrowed. His muscles tensed. The red eye pulsed. "Final containment protocol. Authorized." Jake's head snapped up. His heart hammered against his chest. The walls of the training chamber slid open with a deep mechanical grind. Thick steel plates folded back to reveal massive mechanical shapes, hulking droids armed with plasma cannons and blade-like appendages. They stood nearly 3 meters tall, their armored frames reinforced with dark metal that shimmered with an eerie blue sheen. "Oh, hell," Jake muttered. The AI's voice sharpened. Human threat identified. Lethal force authorized. The war droid's plasma cannons hummed to life. Bright blue light glowed in their barrels. "Jake!" Lena screamed. Jake's body moved before he could think. He dove toward Lena, grabbing her and pulling her to the floor just as the plasma bolts ripped through the air. White-hot energy exploded against the walls behind them, blowing apart metal panels and filling the room with smoke. Jake rolled to his feet, his muscles burning, his breath sharp and fast. He felt the energy pulsing beneath his skin, pushing him forward. His feet slammed against the floor as he sprinted toward the nearest droid. The war droid's arm lifted, its plasma cannon locking onto him. Jake launched himself into the air, twisting mid-flight. He slammed his foot into the droid's arm, forcing it upward. The cannon fired, and the plasma bolt ripped through the ceiling. Sparks and metal rained down. Jake landed on the droid's shoulder and drove his fist into the side of its head. The metal buckled under his strike, and the droid collapsed to the floor in a heap of twisted steel. Jake hit the ground, breathing hard. His hands were shaking, but it wasn't from exhaustion. It was from the power running through his veins. He felt unstoppable. Another droid stepped toward him, its blade-like arms slicing through the air. Jake ducked under the first strike, twisting his body and grabbing the droid's arm. He tore the blade from its joint and spun, driving the sharp metal edge into the droid's chest. The machine sparked violently before collapsing. Jake's gaze shot toward Lena. "Get behind cover." Lena was crouched behind a fallen panel, her hands gripping the edge tightly. "Jake, there are too many of them." Jake's jaw tightened. "Let them come." The floor beneath them rumbled. The AI's red eye pulsed. "Deploying final model," the AI said. A deep grinding sound echoed through the chamber. The floor panels parted, and a massive machine rose from the depths. Its frame was twice the size of the other droids, built from dark, reflective metal. Its arms were lined with plasma cannons and energy blades, and its glowing red eyes pulsed like burning coals. "Oh, come on," Jake muttered. The machine's deep voice echoed through the room. "Threat identified. Termination authorized." Jake took a slow step forward. His whole body was buzzing with energy. His muscles tensed, his vision sharpened. He could feel every vibration in the floor beneath his feet. The machine fired. A stream of plasma bolts tore through the air toward him. Jake's body moved instinctively. He twisted sideways, the bolts missing him by inches. He lunged toward the machine, his feet pounding against the floor. He leaped into the air, fist raised. The machine's massive arm swung toward him, slamming into Jake's side. Jake flew through the air and smashed into the far wall. The impact sent a jolt of pain through his body. He hit the floor hard, gasping for breath. "Jake!" Lena screamed. Jake's vision blurred. He pushed himself onto his knees, coughing hard. Blood dripped from the machine's massive frame loomed over him. Its plasma cannon hummed as it charged for the final shot. Jake's hands pressed against the floor. He could feel the energy pulsing through his body, building beneath his skin. His fingers dug into the metal beneath him. His eyes narrowed. His breath slowed. His heart pounded. Jake's eyes flashed. The floor beneath his hands began to glow. Energy surged through his veins, flowing into the metal. The walls began to vibrate. Sparks erupted from the corners of the room. The machine's plasma cannon fired. Jake launched himself upward. His body blurred with speed. He slammed into the machine's chest, driving his fists into the metal. The machine staggered backward. Jake grabbed its arm and tore the plasma cannon free. He flipped the weapon in his hand and fired point-blank into the machine's head. The machine exploded in a shower of sparks and metal. Jake landed on his feet, his chest heaving. Smoke filled the air around him. His hands were still glowing with that strange energy. The AI's red eye flickered. Error, error, threat level, uncontrollable. Jake's eyes burned. He stepped toward the red eye, his fists clenching. "Stand down," Jake growled. The AI's red light pulsed weakly. Impossible. Jake's hand shot out. He grabbed the red eye and crushed it beneath his fingers. Sparks erupted from the broken lens. The chamber was suddenly silent. The war droids lay still, their lights dim. The air was heavy with smoke and the scent of burning metal. Jake turned toward Lena. His breath was sharp, his muscles trembling. Lena stepped toward him, her eyes wide. "Jake," she whispered. Jake's hand lifted toward her. His skin was still glowing faintly. His breath was shaking. "What am I?" Jake whispered. Lena's hand touched his. Her eyes softened. "You're human," she said. Jake's gaze sharpened. His jaw tightened. "Yeah," he said, "and that's their problem." Jake stood in the middle of the smoking chamber, his breath sharp, his hands still trembling from the raw energy coursing through his body. The twisted wreckage of the war machines surrounded him, their once gleaming metal frames now reduced to piles of broken parts. The red glow of the AI's central eye had faded to nothing, sparks still flickering from the shattered lens beneath his boot. His heart was still pounding, his muscles coiled and tense, but his mind was clear now. His senses were razor-sharp, every detail in the room registering with unnatural clarity. Lena stepped toward him, her face pale. Jake's eyes met hers, and he saw the fear there, but beneath it, there was something else. A quiet understanding, a fragile sort of hope. "Jake," she whispered. What just happened?" Jake swallowed hard. His hands opened and closed at his sides. He could still feel the energy lingering beneath his skin. His fingers buzzed with it. His muscles ached with the effort of holding it back. "I don't know," he said, his voice low. "But I think this is what they were afraid of." Lena's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" Jake's gaze darkened. His jaw tightened. They knew. The High Commander. The AI. They knew humans had this potential. His eyes narrowed. "That's why they tested us. Not to see if we were weak, but to see if we were dangerous." Lena's eyes widened. "And you just proved that we are." Jake's lips curled into a cold smile. "Yeah." A low vibration shuddered through the floor beneath their feet. Jake's head snapped toward the source of the sound. The walls trembled. The ceiling lights flickered. A cold mechanical hum filled the air. "They're not done," Jake said, his voice hard. Lena's eyes darted toward the broken droids. "What do you mean? You destroyed the AI?" Jake's jaw clenched. "It's not just the AI." A deep mechanical voice echoed through the chamber, cold and calculating. "Threat assessment. Human species. Designation. Wildcard. Classification. Unpredictable. Response. Termination." Jake's fists tightened. His heart hammered against his chest. Metal panels in the walls slid open. Jake's eyes narrowed as more war droids emerged from the shadows. But these were different. Sleeker. Faster. Their dark armor pulsed with red light. Their limbs were sharper, and their plasma cannons hummed with a dangerous energy. "They adapted," Lena whispered. Jake's muscles tensed. He could feel the energy building beneath his skin again, burning through his veins. His eyes sharpened. His breath steadied. The first droid lunged forward, its blade arms slicing through the air. Jake's body reacted instantly. He ducked beneath the strike, twisting his body and driving his fist into the droid's chest. The metal caved beneath his blow, and the droid collapsed to the ground. Another droid charged toward Lena. Jake's head snapped toward it. His muscles coiled. He moved faster than thought. His feet slammed against the floor as he launched himself toward her. He caught the droid's arm mid-swing and twisted, ripping the limb free with a sickening crunch. He drove the severed limb into the droid's head, and it collapsed with a burst of sparks. Jake turned toward Lena, his breath sharp. "Stay behind me." Lena's eyes were wide, but she nodded. Jake stepped forward as more droids closed in around them. His muscles flexed. His eyes flashed. His hands glowed faintly with that strange inner light. "Come on," he growled. The droids charged. Jake's body blurred with speed as he met them head-on. He ducked beneath the first strike, driving his fist into a droid's chest. Metal shattered beneath his knuckles. He spun, catching another droid's blade and twisting it free. He drove it through the machine's head, then kicked the wreckage aside. 2 more droids closed in from behind. Jake sensed them before they struck. His body twisted, his fist shooting out with lightning speed. He caught one droid across the jaw, sending it crashing into the wall. He grabbed the second by the throat and slammed it into the ground, crushing its head beneath his heel. Jake's breath was ragged. His hands were shaking. His body was buzzing with energy. The droids lay in pieces around him. Smoke curled from their shattered frames. The ice-cold voice echoed through the chamber. Adaptation confirmed. Escalation authorized. Jake's head snapped up. A low rumble vibrated through the floor. The far wall slid open, revealing a dark metallic corridor. Jake's eyes narrowed. He turned toward Lena. "Stay here." "Jake." He didn't wait. His feet carried him forward. His muscles burned. His breath was sharp and fast. He stepped into the dark corridor, the cold metal pressing against his skin. At the end of the hall, a single door stood open. A soft red light pulsed beyond it. Jake stepped through. The room beyond was dark, cold. Jake's breath fogged in the chill air. At the center of the room, a massive form loomed. A machine, humanoid in shape but towering over him. Its frame was dark and jagged. Its eyes glowed with cold red light. Its hands were tipped with razor-sharp claws, and its chest pulsed with the deep hum of a power core. The AI's voice echoed through the darkness. Final threat level assessment. Wildcard species. Conclusion. Humans must be eliminated. The machine's eyes flared. Its massive frame shifted forward. Jake's muscles tensed. His breath slowed. His heart hammered. The machine lunged toward him. Jake's feet pounded against the floor as he charged forward. He leaped into the air, his fist driving toward the machine's head. The machine's arm shot out, catching his fist mid-strike. Jake's body twisted, his other hand lashing out and striking the machine's arm. Metal buckled beneath his strike, but the machine didn't fall. The machine's claws lashed out. Jake twisted sideways, barely avoiding the strike. He hit the ground and rolled, launching himself toward the machine's legs. His fist slammed into its knee joint, and the machine stumbled. Jake sprang upward, driving his fists into the machine's chest. Sparks erupted from the impact. The machine staggered backward. Jake's breath was ragged. His hands were burning with energy. The machine's eyes flared brighter. Its power core pulsed dangerously. Jake's eyes narrowed. He launched himself forward. His hands caught the machine's head. His muscles tensed. He twisted. Metal groaned beneath his strength. Jake's arms blurred with motion. His hands tore the machine's head free. The machine's frame collapsed, sparks cascading from its broken body. Jake hit the ground hard, his chest heaving. Smoke curled around him. His hands were shaking. The AI's voice flickered weakly. Human threat level. Uncontrollable. Escalation. Impossible. Jake's hand shot out. His fingers closed around the AI's final core. He crushed it beneath his fist. The red light faded. Jake stood in the darkness, his breath sharp. Behind him, Lena's voice broke the silence. "Jake?" Jake turned toward her. His breath steadied. "It's over," Jake said quietly. Lena stepped toward him. What does this mean?" Jake's gaze sharpened. His jaw tightened. It means they're afraid of us.